Good evening and welcome to the February 8th, 2022 Verona Board of Education meeting. We're calling the meeting to order. It's 7:04 and please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The reading of the meeting notice. This meeting is being conducted in compliance with the open meeting session that the Verona Board of Education passed a resolution at its annual reorganization meeting held on January 4th, 2022. The meeting set forth the schedule of its regular meetings, which resolution was within 7 days of passage. The schedule was sent to the Verona Cedar Grove Times, the Star Ledger, the Township of Verona, and the VEA. Postings of this meeting setting forth the time, location, and agenda were posted at the Verona Board of Education office and on the Verona Public Schools District website. The Verona Board of Education operates under a consent agenda format. Any board member has the right to have an item, pulled to be voted upon or discussed separately. Copies of tonight's agenda and resolutions have been made available to the public and the press. Mr. Cruz, can you please do the roll call?
Yes. Mr. Walker. Yes. Mr. Day.
Yes.
Mrs. Drabby.
Here.
Mrs. Prisco.
Here.
Mrs. Fresky.
Here.
We have quorum. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So we're going to start off with our superintendent's report, Dr. Bernari, and that's going to be covering the district goals and the enrollment projections.
Thank you, Ms. Fresky, and thank you very much. This evening, I will be presenting to you an update on where we are on our Verona Public Schools goals for the 2021-22 school year. So, as I'm sure you all know, the district's mission and core values that were created during the strategic planning process started in 2018. In partnership with a supportive community, we inspire our students to be creative, critical thinkers, and compassionate global citizens through dynamic teaching, meaningful curricula, and enriching experiences. You see here the core values of integrity, accountability, respect, teamwork, creativity, resilience, passion, and wellness. Also part of the strategic plan, there were 6 strategies that comprise the framework within which the district functions. So the first is a secure and optimized financial resources. Second, uphold a healthy and respectful school culture consistent with our core values. Third, partner locally and globally to expand opportunities for our school community. Fourth, continue to implement an engaging curriculum with meaningful experiences. Fifth, provide relevant professional development and resources to support dynamic teaching. And sixth, continue to provide upgraded technology and sustainable facilities. From that mission and those strategies, the following goals are established for this school year. Goal 1. The Verona Public Schools will provide all students with rigorous and engaging educational experiences that prepare them for future challenges through a system of curriculum review and revision, timely and appropriate professional development, and the allocation of resources and technology to support teaching and learning. Strategies 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6 are included in Goal 1. Goal 2. The Verona Public Schools will continue to enhance a healthy and respectful school culture consistent with our core values through the implementation of reflective and analytical strategies that foster a sense of belonging for all students. Strategies 2, 3, 4, and 5 are incorporated into Goal 2. Finally, Goal 3, the Verona Public Schools will ensure our stewardship of district fiscal and operational resources by analyzing current methods and implementing new strategies as required. Strategies 1, 3, and 6 are included in Goal 3. The next slides that are available for your viewing are separated by goal. And the columns that you'll see include the strategy, the goal at the top, the goal activities in column 1, the strategy in the second column, the person or persons responsible for either implementing, completing, or ensuring that the work is moving forward for each of these activities. And the last column is status of where that activity happens to be at this moment during this school year. So what I will do is I'll give you I'm not going to read every single slide verbatim, but I will point out some things that I think are important for the status on where we are with these goals today. So the Pikapak curriculum is something that has been incorporated by the district, and in our elementary schools, lessons are implemented using this curriculum in the area of social emotional learning. At the middle and high school level, Effective School Solutions is a program that is intended to assist our most vulnerable students who are struggling with mental health. We also have some professional development activities noted with Goal 1, the first being in the area of social studies, the Gilder Lehrman Institute of American History teaching literacy through history, support documentation, and the practice of disciplinary thinking skills. In the area of language arts, we have professional development that is supporting differentiated reading and writing for teachers and students in grades K to 4 with a trainer, Ms. Clark of Gravity Goldberg LLC. And we have several of our administrators working with that group and the of teachers. And the emphasis is placed on phonics, word study, mini lessons, guided reading. And there's more text there that I will have to. There we go. Okay. All right. We're also working with grades 5 through 8 with the same trainer and administrators supporting differentiated reading and writing for teachers and students. In the area of mathematics, we have a professional development relationship with Bill Jackson, and he and our Department of Curriculum and Instruction are working with elementary and middle school principals to provide Singapore math training with implementation of mathematical ideas that enrich student learning and teacher pedagogy, talking about how to make math student-centered in our curricular approach. And also, this goal is to improve mathematical instruction, curriculum, assessment, and most importantly, our teachers' approach to teaching and assessing mathematics using student-centered constructive approach anchored in mathematical modeling. We also have several training initiatives going on for different grade levels, grades 1, 2, and 5 dimensions of mathematics program. Grades 3 and 4 also working with the dimensions of mathematics program, but this is to shift to peer observation and feedback. And grades 6, 7, and 8 and algebra and geometry for high school teachers, continuing the work to create rich mathematics tasks and exploring lesson study. There's professional development also happening in the area of world language, continued professional development with TCNJ Professor Dr. Joseph Goebel on output theory strategies with actful can-do statements. This is intended to ensure that our world language program assessments and strategies are incorporating the integrated performance assessments. And world language teachers are also working to reflect and refine their teaching assessment practices to improve student learning. Another initiative that is going on that you'll hear more about from Dr. Miller shortly is our assessment program, and this is the NWEA MAP Growth and Edmentum Exact Path. Elementary and middle school teachers are working with NWEA MAP Growth assessments in reading and math. There are fall, winter, and spring administrations. MAP Growth student results will then be connected to Edmentum Exact Path that will focus on 4 skilled deficiencies in each discipline. The next piece is our Start Strong assessments, and there's a presentation on this evening. And these are the Department of Education assessments that are designed to address student growth and potential learning gaps. And we have also spent some resources on the purchase of technology for curriculum and instruction on subscription and Chromebooks to make sure that our students and our teachers have the technology devices and resources that they need. The second goal, we have several activities under this goal as well that are happening. So our certified school mental wellness specialists, there are 15 counselors and CST members who are presently undergoing this training. The Verona Health and Wellness Parent Training and Speaker Series. We have had several presentations and there are more coming later on in the school year. In May, there will be a health and wellness fair that's being planned for May 14th, 2022 at the Verona Civic Center. We have elementary social worker. Elementary schools in the district will benefit from comprehensive approach to social and emotional assistance. Special Education Parent Advisory Committee, or the CPAC, is going strong and is very active in the district. Transition meetings for students who are moving up to middle school and high school. There will be parental assistance during the transition years. Also under goal 2, the statewide Handle with Care program is being implemented. Collaboration between the Verona Police Department enables the implementation of school-based programs to assist our community's families. Special Education Parent Advisory Committee continues to collaborate with special education parents. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion request for proposal, we ended up having 6 inquiries. We had 3 proposals that were completed and submitted. Those are undergoing both a review and then an interview process, which will be occurring, I believe, next week. Is our interview process. Also, the New Jersey Consortia for Excellence Through Equity, or NJCEE. We are in the process of participating in workshops and turnkeying information to our staff. The third district, which again has to do with operational resources, special services projection workshop. So each year, all special education personnel gather to discuss the continuum of in-district programming for the next school year, as well as a program created to meet the students' needs. Implementation of the new financial system, Genesis School-Fi. This program has been set up and has been implemented to help us increase efficiency and provide a paperless system to manage budget, procurement, payroll, and HR. The referendum, as I think everyone knows by now, is nearing its final phase, and we expect the HVAC system installation and then its testing to be completed by May. District Goal 3 also includes the use of ESSER funds, which is federal grant money to purchase student devices that was used to purchase Chromebooks for middle school students. We have a newly hired IT technician to support students throughout the district. This position rounded out our IT team. Server backup and recovery. We have been implementing live disaster recovery for district servers. And the allocation of ESSER2 and ARP ESSER funds to expand and enhance after-school and summer programming following grant requirements. So those subgrants are specific to both outside of the school day programming and summer programming in order to enrich student learning. Goal 3 also includes school safety and security enhancements throughout the district, using the school security grant local funds. There's a plan in place to implement these based on the requirements of Alyssa's law. The annual audit outcome and budget preparation. I know that those of you who follow our board meetings know that we've already heard the preliminary report from our auditor. And the report showed that we've increased amounts to fund our reserve accounts. Budget preparation is based on input from all of our schools and all departments. And then the, I think that server backup and recovery is a duplicate, so I'll have to adjust that. Board members, I don't know if you have any other questions, but at this point, I want to just make sure that you're aware that it's pretty evident that the district is moving in a lot of directions to ensure that we have our district goals well underway.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
Yeah, real quick. So these goals were all made, what, 3 or 4 years ago or something like that?
So the goals themselves are language that was used from the
Mhm.
strategic plan. So all of the things that the district has been doing since the creation of that strategic plan in 2018, each year the district pulls certain aspects of that work out and creates annual goals. So what we've done here, since the strategic plan is in its 4th of 5 years, we've tried to ensure that the goals encompass all of the work that's going on to make sure that, you know, by the end of next year, we've got that, not only our district goals completed, but also that the strategic plan is fully implemented.
Perfect. I think that when we look to make our new strategic plan as a board, we should just always kind of have the idea that, you know, it's a living, breathing document, you know, because it looks like these goals are solid and legit, but it looks like we're kind of keeping the goals we had in the past and then mapping COVID based on the things we've already had up there. When COVID's probably something that would, you know, we could always add a new goal if we had to as a board. So hopefully we don't have to deal with COVID too much more moving forward, but we don't know what the next variable is it's going to come to us as a board. So I think we should always keep that option open to put in a new goal, or, you know, some goals you can complete before a 3 or 5 year cycle. Thank you.
Is there anybody else?
Yes, Mrs. Freshy, I have a quick question, Dr. Fenari.
Sure.
On the referendum update that you did,
Mhm.
you mentioned the HVAC and the air conditioning being tested by May.
Mhm.
So we don't know if the air conditioning is working.
Well, no, it's,
'Cause I just want to
The-
make sure for everyone out in the, 'cause,
Yeah,
well,
yeah.
that'll be,
so, and I may be stealing a little thunder from the B&G committee, sorry, Kim. But
okay,
in order for the HVAC system to be fully operational and tested in a way that's going to show the environmental change that it creates, we need the weather to be warmer. So the recommendation from our site manager was, and the contractor, was to wait till May.
So what they're gonna do, Prisca, is, it is on, but I am not. So this mask is not my friend. They are gonna be doing the testing the week of before spring break, and on the week of spring break. So they have to wait for it to get warm to make it a valid test.
Yeah.
And they will be training everyone about the system. The train will be training everybody this week. So they'll be training the school staff on how to use the system. Everything's up and running, fire inspections all been completed in all the buildings. I'm doing a report now. Basically they'll be doing the testing and the AC prep. So we're very excited that HVAC will be up and running and be tested.
Mr. Day.
Any other questions?
So the training on how to work, like,
training
it's a
on
thermostat, right? You just kind of pressed up, down, no?
There's a lot of controls.
Okay.
Mrs. Briscoe.
It's all computer,
think
it's
you
all
need to go
computer based, and that's what they were waiting for the most part, was this computer to come in. And
Yeah, okay.
they have to train them on that.
We don't have a nest. We actually have to, yeah, okay. Okay. thank
I just have a question for Mr. Waka. I was just trying to understand what you were saying. So pretty much what you were saying is when we start creating the new strategic plan and create the district goals based on that, do you want like language put in that we can add goals as we move on?
More philosophical than the actual language, in that, like, when something is devastating to the school structure as COVID or comes up, you know, we would be able to add a new goal because this is what is required of us now. And also, like, not every goal has to be a 5-year start to finish thing. You know, some things we could finish in 2 or 3 years, which might give us more time to add something else in the back end of that plan. But yeah, my comment was more philosophical than language.
Thank you. I mean, just to speak to that, a lot of these goals, though, I mean, I think like on paper, it almost seems like some of them are like a reaction to COVID. But like specifically with the health and wellness goals for goal 2 that are encompass a lot of goal 2, that was a plan that was mapped out many years ago by Dr. Moriello and Dr. Dionisio. And, you know, started with obtaining ESS or any third-party services at the time, and it just turned out to be ESS. And then start, you know, with our most compromised or most at-risk population, and then sort of build out from there. And it just so happened that COVID sort of happened in the middle of that. So just to clarify that. But I agree with you. I agree with you on that. Thank you.
And to the point that you're both talking about, the strategic plan has always been a living document. And like Dr. Fernari was saying, although there's a 5-year roadmap, the way it's broken down into the segments gives latitude to have annual goals. So the annual goals are going to fit into one of those buckets. And I think they do encompass everything from finance to health and wellness, to safety, to student development. And then it just shifts. And that's one of our biggest things going forward, is that was like the largest community input, was creating this plan and a goal for the district. So I think it already is a living document, and, you know, it's well noted that we'll continue it to be worded that way and have that flexibility built in for us. Are there any other questions? If not, I'm going to have Dr. Fernari continue with the enrollment projection.
Okay. So every year, districts take a look at our current enrollment, and we make a prediction as to what enrollment will look like, or we think it will look like, in the following school year. Now, in some grade levels, it's, I don't want to say as simple as, but it is a matter of moving a grade level forward, first grade to second grade to third grade to fourth grade, et cetera. Some grade levels, however, are slightly unknown, pre-K for one, kindergarten for another. Now, our pre-K program is prescribed by the fact that it is a dual enrollment program. We have general education students and special education students with IEPs. And so Dr. Moriello and the principals work very closely to make sure that that program has no more than the prescribed number of students in either category, and that we have the wherewithal to work with those students. Kindergarten is sometimes a little bit of a difficult thing to predict. So one of the things that we do is we take a look at what the Bureau of Statistics, of Vital Statistics, says the live births were in our community 5 years ago, or 5 years prior to the date of next September. So we would be looking at the 2017 live birth data to give us a general idea of the number of infants that were born in Verona that year. That number is certainly not a solid predictor of what our kindergarten class will look like. It does give us a place to start. And so we know that in 2017, there were 168 live births in Verona. That, of course, we know that people will move into town, they'll move out of town, we'll have, you know, there are going to be the effects of in the future years of the construction of new dwellings in town. So we're not getting to that point quite yet. But if we look at that 168 as a potential number, and then we start to look at what our kindergarten registrations actually look like. And so what I will present to you now includes all of that thinking. So as of today, we have currently enrolled or registered for kindergarten 142 students, with that 168 in the back of our minds, just to know that there's potential for that number to go up. Okay. That's for the following school year. So for the 22-23 school year, we're projecting 153 first graders, 163 second graders, 167 third graders, 159 fourth graders, 175 fifth graders, 174 sixth graders, 145 seventh graders, 158 eighth graders, 173 ninth graders, 162 10th graders, 167 11th graders, and 148 12th graders. So those other grades, other than kindergarten, are taking the current grade level and moving it forward by 1 year. Now, our total enrollment by elementary school, again, our kindergarten registration is still in flux. So as of today, we're predicting Brookdale Avenue School with 116 students. However, we still have kindergarten registration is still open. Forest Avenue School with 210 students. FM Brown, 255 students. Lanning Avenue, 227 students. HBW Middle School, we're predicting 652 students, and Verona High School, 650 students. So again, these numbers are for budgetary purposes so that we can begin to predict the kinds and numbers of materials, the dollars that we may need to spend at each grade level based on the number of students we need to serve, and the staffing potential. Now, it also should be noted that we have several grade levels at the elementary level where we have classes that are currently homerooms that are currently with these numbers. They look like there are about 24 students in a class. Now, that's getting very close to the point where the district will need to make a decision as to whether or not we would need to open up a new section in some of those grade levels. So the next time that we do an enrollment report, which will be shortly, we're going to probably do these at least once a month to give the board and the public an idea of where we are. And when Mr. Cruz and I do the budget enrollment, the budget report, enrollment plays a factor in how those resources are allocated. So this is a very brief 30,000 foot in the air view, and this will be part of the minutes of this meeting. And so the enrollment report will be available. It'll be posted on the website as part of the minutes for this meeting, so that you get a sense over time, as we do more of these, what that enrollment change looks like. Okay.
Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
I
Mr.
just
Day?
had a question regarding out-of-district placement. So
Yes.
as part of that enrollment, we have people that are out of town that come here, pay us a fee most of the time to participate. I know once we had issues in the past where potentially you had class limits, when classes were getting larger,
Mhm.
you potentially could stop that inflow for new students, correct?
So I think we have to just be careful about what so out of district placement is when we send a student out of district for a
Okay.
program
I
that we
mean people
can't
that live
accommodate.
out of-
And then,
out of
so we're talking
Verona.
about tuition students coming
Yeah,
here.
I'm talking people live out of Verona that come,
Mhm.
that move, they say they're in West Orange, but they want to
Sure.
go to Verona High School.
Right.
They would come to our town and pay us a fee.
Yeah, and that is always on a case-by-case basis. And it's always dependent upon our resources and our ability to add another student in any grade level.
But I'm saying if the enrollment gets to a certain point,
Sure.
where maybe on the bubble of adding a class, potentially we could stop
Sure.
that by,
Oh, yeah. Well,
By
and that's,
controlling it.
that's not necessarily a given. So we don't have to have somebody from outside of the district come to school here.
Yeah.
That's a courtesy that some districts, including this one, have provided in the past.
Dr. Fenari, what's been the, or maybe Mr. Cruz could help out too, what's been the past practice
Yes.
of our district? So if we have more than 25 kindergartners, we're either gonna have to open up a new section or ask the county for that waiver. Have we typically asked the county for that waiver in our district, or have we typically looked to open up a new section when we get to that number?
I think, and granted, I'm only here since November, so historically, I'm not sure, but I have, just based on conversation, I think we look as to, we take a look as to, whether or not we should open a new section. The other alternative that many districts do, and you all are going to have to tell me if this is a Verona practice, would be to provide additional adult support in a class as it gets to that point.
Dr. Fenari, do we know which elementary schools? Is it all 4 elementary schools who have classes, varying classes who are close to tipping
I
point?
think right now it's 3 of the 4
3 of the 4. Do we know which buildings those are? Are you ready to report out
I
on them? No.
do.
If you don't have that information right now, that's
Yeah,
fine.
let me take a look. Hang on one second. Okay, let me just have to do this quickly. It looks like mainly Forest and FN Brown,
Forest and FM Brown.
mainly, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And lastly, in the vein of attendance and student enrollment, in the past, we've had some issues with students that are not in the district attending school in the district.
Right.
And we started to look at putting in different points of entry, the way you would enroll for kindergarten.
Okay.
And the thought at the time, and this might change or, be looked at again going forward, is at the natural break. So it would
Mhm.
be upon entering school initially at the middle school level, going into 5th grade, and then again into high school.
Mhm.
So I think that's something that we just need to be mindful of. I
Sure.
don't know if it's still been an issue because we've essentially had a crazy couple of years with pandemic.
Mhm.
So that is something that we should keep an eye on as
Yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Are there any other questions in regard to the enrollment? If not, we are going to move on to our other presentations. And our first presentation up is Mrs. Jessica Pearson from the Verona Environmental Commission. And she's going to be presenting on anti-idling.
Everyone. I'm nervous. Thank you, Dr. Venari, President Fresky, and Vice President Prisco, board members and administrators for inviting the commission to give you a little bit of information about what's going on with idling. By way of brief introduction, I'll try to keep it brief. My name is Jessica Pearson. I am the chair currently of the Verona Environmental Commission. We are a commission that is established by statute. We can have up to 7 members, 2 additional alternates who have to be residents of the town, serve with no compensation, and for the environmental, to the end of the environmental wellness of the community. Our members include a former science teacher, a speech language pathologist, a beekeeper who actually produces honey, a software engineer, and 3 physical engineers, 2 of which specialize in stormwater management and 1 specializes in environmental remediation. So we have an amazing set of members. We also regularly attend webinars to educate ourselves that are generally hosted by excellent organizations like Rutgers University, the Watershed Institute of New Jersey, ANJAC, the Association of New Jersey Environmental Commissions, Rutgers, Princeton Hydro, and so many more. And these keep us on top of our game, and they make us aware of all of the issues that are going on around the state of New Jersey, in Verona as well. The commission is empowered to conduct research into the use of open land, and we're empowered to make recommendations to the council and the planning board about the use of both public and private lands within the township. We are also empowered to make policy recommendations on issues concerning water and water resource management, solid waste management, flora and fauna protection, soil, landscape, and waterway protection, and as is germane to this evening, air pollution and air quality. So on that specific topic, we recently sent a recommendation to the town council recommending a strong no idle resolution, which would support no idling of gas powered vehicles around the town. The resolution observes and adheres to the state law NJAC 7:2715, which prohibits idling beyond 3-minute limit. This is a state law. It applies to everybody within the state, with logical exceptions like emergency vehicles. And you guys, when you're stuck in your traffic snare on the avenue, on the avenue, sure, but on the parkway, more likely. So as soon as we saw the council pass the resolution, we sent word to you guys, and we thank you very much for inviting us this evening to sort of let everybody know, which is why I'm here, is to let everybody know why the commission was so steadfast about the passage of this. And it really boils down to one issue in particular, and it's health. Basically, we want our residents to know that there are two types of health that we have to worry about for our community. One is the health of our planet. It is a well-known fact that fossil fuel emissions have exacerbated climate change. And for those of you who don't like that terminology, I'll put it more simply. The steep increase in regularity and intensity of severe storms that we right here in Verona have been experiencing for approximately the past 10 years. Secondly, and perhaps more relative to this board, is the health of our residents. It is also a well-documented and scientific fact that idling gasoline-powered vehicles emit toxins into the air that have harmful effects on our health. And as harmful as the effects of particulate matter, nitrous oxide, VOCs, carbon monoxide, and sulfur dioxides are in adults, they are much more harmful to young developing children. Children breathe up to 50% more air per pound of body weight than do adults. So it speaks directly to the developing lungs, developing brains, that young children that would have these horrible impacts when exposed to the toxins from car pollution. According to the World Health Organization, 4 million children develop asthma every year, which boils down to about 11,000 cases per day. Add to this a heightened susceptibility and sensitivity to allergies, to cardiovascular diseases, as well as a notable structural change in brain development of children who are exposed to the toxins of car emissions. So this begs the question, why wouldn't everybody, my gosh, why wouldn't everybody want to turn the car off? Why wouldn't everybody want to reduce the likelihood of these cases of health problems, especially for kids, for children? And the VEC doesn't think it's about a willingness or a lack thereof to want to comply. It's really all about having a bad habit. When you get into your car every morning, you could be juggling a cup of coffee, a laptop, texting, talking on your cell phone, and have a bunch of other bags in your hand. And what's the first thing you do when you sit down in your car? You put your seatbelt on. It doesn't matter how much crap you have in your hands, it's a habit. Idling is also a habit, and it's a bad habit. And our hope is that people will, once they think about it a little bit more, and once they get word about it and hear about it a little bit more, they'll pull over to the side of the road and they'll automatically just turn the car off without thinking, much like they put their seatbelt on. So once again, this resolution supports townwide prohibition of idling. And that means at the drive-through bank line, that means that the guy that you see sitting in the convenience store parking lot in an idling car for 20 minutes, scratching off his scratch-off lottery tickets, someone's got to tell this guy he's spending more money on gasoline than on lottery tickets, which is probably hard to believe, but it's probably true. The reason we're here is because, unfortunately, we see more populous and concentrated and daily idling outside of the school buildings and the sports fields. And these are the fields where kids are, doing amazing athletic training on a day-to-day basis, or they're marching for hours with their musical instruments, or they're doing acrobatics in cheer practice. And the last thing they need is to be hampered performance-wise or health-wise by car emissions. So health is the main thrust of why we're here. And we think we're going to ask for 4 things from the entire administration. And I don't think it's a heavy lift, but we're going to ask anyway. And the VEC will lend any help that it can to help support you in hopefully carrying out some of these. We'd like to see, well, we think it would be helpful if legible signage were installed at key drop-off and pickup locations at the schools and the sports fields. If the township council needs to team up with you to do some of the sports fields, like up at the community center, I think that they would be more than happy to do that. I did drive by some of the schools, and some of the signage is really worn out, hard to read. One, especially in front of FN, even though every sign says no idling, no idling, no idling. There's like one big sign and it's totally worn out. We could do better. And I think that a sign serves as a gentle reminder to those people that are caught up in their daily grinds. Oh, I should turn off my car. Just a gentle reminder. We're not looking to be punitive here. We just want people to comply. We'd like the administration to make sure that their principals and their teachers and staff all know about this rule. And we're hoping that once that's done, you can send out notification to all parents, students, SCAs, and coaches. We think, not just notification, but something describing the importance of turning your cars off and reminding your friends to do the same. Also, you can supplement this communication with families with a no idle pledge form. And the schools could, do 1 month of no idle pledge form contest and see which schools have the best response rates or something to that effect. We also think it would be helpful if a short dialogue could happen on idling between teachers and students, perhaps in a gym class. When I was in this school system, all of the health chats happened through gym class. And this is indeed a chat about health. So we know that students like to tell their parents what they're doing wrong. And I think it would be really effective to let the kids know exactly what's going on and how important it is for mom and dad to turn the car off. Mom or dad, or mom and dad, doesn't matter. And lastly, this is the heaviest lift of all. We have to promote walking more. We really do need to promote walking more. And Steve Neal, who has been incredibly supportive to the VEC, he has some great ideas. I know that we will be supporting his ideas, and I'm hoping that he'll be bringing them to you soon on how we can promote walking more. That said, and of course, Verona is in a great climate area, at least for the time being. So there's really no excuse for 2/3 of the school calendar year. We have really good weather conditions for walking. There's really not much of an excuse. So with that, I would be happy to take any questions from the board if you have any. I also have a wealth of resources that I can forward to you if you need, that have resources with videos, with places to maybe buy replacement signage. She looks at the buildings and grounds guy. Resources that have media kits, no idle pledge forms, etc. And again, thank you so much for allowing the VEC to get this out publicly as an important community measure. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Pearson. Does anybody have any questions? Ms.
I just
Drappi?
want to thank you as well for coming out and providing us with all this information. Just a couple of, I guess, comments. The SCA is an independent organization, so I would encourage you to reach out to them separately. And then, hopefully the independent schools, SCAs can disseminate the information as
Okay.
needed. That was really it. Okay.
And Jessica, thank you very much for your presentation. I did talk to the director of buildings and grounds, and he did, we verified there are signs, but there are some signs that need some help. So happy to take any assistance from you and your team on where to get the signs and potentially how we can upgrade our signs.
I'll send you some links,
Okay, thank you.
definitely.
So I think everything you're saying is logical, and you said you were nervous, but you did a very good job. I think there's another part of it too. You talked about bad habits, but I think the parents, we all have one really good habit, right? And that's that we love our kids. And especially when it's cold out, it's so cold that you can see your breath, and you could definitely see the cars fuming, in front of the schools as well. And I get nervous because that limits the crossing guards' visibility, it limits the driver's visibility and the pedestrians' visibility. So I think everything you're saying is logical. And I want to thank you for coming up and saying it.
Thank you.
Excellent. And just thank you, echoing all the responses that were up here. And I think Mrs. Drappies was a very good one to reach out to the SCAs because they all are independent. And it might be something too that we could discuss and maybe pushing out in the Friday folder and some of the other communication venues that we have available. So
I just wanted to add that there is the potential for looking at a no idling school policy. So I would be happy to bring that to the committee, Buildings and Grounds Committee, and we can take a look at that as well.
Thank you so much.
Ms. Pearson,
Appreciate it.
was there still a contest? They used to do a contest. I know when my children were in elementary school, there was a contest, a poster contest for no idling
Yeah,
with the
we
students. Do you
sus-
still do that or?
We were sponsoring those, and then COVID happened and we weren't allowed to come into the schools. We ordinarily would have hosted that once a year, basically in October, right before Walk to School Day, the one day of the year that everybody pretends to walk to school. And unfortunately, and then we would come into the schools, hang the posters and choose a winner from every school. But with the regulations of COVID and the changes in accessibility to the school systems, we canceled it. We also knew that parents had and students had so much stress from not having had what they needed, more education, that we did not want to put additional pressure on them to do that, especially over the past couple of years. So we will be discussing in our upcoming meetings whether to reinstate that contest again. We are leaning if we do it, we're leaning towards doing it for the 4th grade only. They're sort of the seniors of the elementary schools. And it happens to be a lot more manageable for the VEC to judge, the class sizes that were just discussed, to judge that many posters for, 150 posters versus the entire school for elementary schools posters. So we're looking at doing that again. Yes. Anyone else?
I think we're good. Thank you
right.
so much.
Thank you very much.
And moving along with our other presentations, I know we have a lot tonight. We have Mr. Cruz, our business administrator, presenting Budget 101.
Thank you. Good evening. Yes.
Shoulder.
Okay. Yeah. So good evening, everyone. So I have the pleasure tonight to present Budget 101. This is a comprehensive overview of how your school budget is prepared. And that's also the Board of Ed's role in the budget. So after tonight, you won't be CPA, but you'll definitely have a greater understanding of your school budget. So that's what I'll promise for the takeaway. So the first thing we have is what is your school budget? So basically is a balancing between the needs and priorities and the funding that we have here at the Board of Education. So the fiscal year is from July 1 through June 30th. And it's developed, the development process starts in the month of December and goes all the way to the end of February. And it's submitted for review in the months of March and April. So there are 4 factors in the budget. The first one is the goals of the Board of Education, followed by mandates from the federal and state regulators. Also, the stakeholders that actually provide input, which is the community, staff, and administration, followed by the needs and priorities. These are the direct services that goes into our schools. So where does the revenue come from? Here in Verona, largely 88% is tax levy dollars that's funded by property taxes. 5% comes from state aid. 2% is from federal funding. With the American Relief Plan, that actually is now 6%, but normally will be at 2%. And then we have reserves that's around 3%. And miscellaneous revenues and interest comes in at 1%. Our expenses, the majority of it is salaries, benefits, out of district tuition, professional services, utilities, repairs, maintenance, transportation, equipment, and supplies. So how do we build a budget? So the first step is reviewing the required spending. For the big piece, as I mentioned before, is contracted salaries, and these salaries are usually negotiated for 3 years. Same thing with health benefits; they're negotiated, fixed for 3 years, but the costs are not. The costs usually go up annually. Mandated special ed spending, tuition, additional staff, etc. Mandated professional services, the board attorney, auditors, architect. Essential building maintenance is utilities, maintenance and repairs, transportation, mandated insurances, property. We also have cybersecurity and other miscellaneous insurance that we need to cover for liability purposes, and then tuition costs, benefits, and state testing. For the required spending, a lot of that is all fixed cost, and then there's about less than 20% is the variable costs, and that's where we have the flexibility. And the variable costs will be our textbooks, instructional materials, teacher professional development, general supplies, construction facilities plans, and other improvements to programs, instruction facilities, and special initiatives. The third step is looking at what are the additional aid and revenues coming in from the state aid. We normally get those figures at the end of February when the governor releases his address, and federal aids are calculated based on prior year and historical trends. So we normally budget 80 to 90% of that. Bank interests are calculated also by the trends, and tuition is based on the current trends of what we're receiving from that. And then lastly is our other revenues, which is transportation fees, et cetera, rentals of our facilities and spaces. In the calculation, what we actually end up doing is adding the required spending plus the total variable, and subtracting the revenues not from tax levy dollars. At the end, the difference is the local taxes that will be needed to support the budget. So the last step is local tax levy is allowed to be increased annually at 2%, but what if your budget requires more than 2%? There's the 4 options. One is utilizing the allowable adjustment to levy more than 2%. And those allowable factors currently is enrollment, health benefits, and cap banking. What cap banking is unused qualified tax levies from prior years. For example, if the tax levy from prior year was 1.5% increase, there's a 0.5% tax levy that gets banked, and that banking gets banked for 3 years. The board is able to utilize that in a future year in order to increase tax levy above the 2%. The second step, the second option, it will be to cut expenses. And usually that's done in consultation with the administration, finance committee, the Board of Education, the superintendent's office, and my office, the business office. Step three is to tap into our surplus. As we heard from our last board meeting, our auditors were here and reported out that there's a $900,000 surplus being kept for the new budget. So that's something that we're able to bring into the new budget. And the other option is to tap into our reserves. We have capital reserves that's actually reserved for a specific purpose, and then maintenance reserved for a specific purpose as well. And then the last option is the second question. Second question is basically that it's a question that goes out to the community on election day. The majority, it has to be passed by a majority. And the only issue with the second question, because it's on November, it could only support programs that are happening after that vote. So we start September. So there's a lot of programming that's already has to be in place. And the second question can only support that afterwards. A lot of school districts are right now in a predicament where they're looking at reverting back to an April election day because they want the option to be able to implement and support with the second question option. So the 7 steps to approve the budget. The first step is where we're about to present the preliminary budget in the next board meeting, and that's assembled here, and then is followed by presenting that budget to the public. And then step 3, the Board of Ed votes to approve the preliminary budget. That budget gets sent to the state or the county for approval. And then upon approval becomes a final budget. That final budget then it's presented to the public, and the board votes on approving that final budget at the April meeting. So I'm just going to touch a little bit about the role of the finance committee and the board. So some of the duties for the board, it's really about having oversight over and advising on the matters that is pertaining to finance and budget and the use of school monies. The other factor that it's super important is that the finance committee also works with the other corresponding committees to actually review costs and factor those costs on the impact of the board's budget. The last piece that I wanted to highlight is the bills list that gets actually presented to the board every month. I actually added one line of what that looks like, and basically vendor payments will list out the vendor's name, the account number that payment is actually coming out of, the vendor ID, and the purchase order number. A brief description of what that purchase is, and the check number followed by the amount of that check. And each line, even if it's actually multiple invoices, it will be a separate line for each invoice. There are 3 reports that gets presented to the board on a monthly basis. And last month we had our December report presented, and it was the board secretary report, which is a financial snapshot. And it was the reflection of what's going on in the district in regards to instructional programs. Another report is a Treasury Report, which is an independent report that gets it reconciles all the bank accounts and should match, should always match the board secretary report. And that's right now the board, the treasurer of school money for the Verona Board of Education is Matt Larissy, and he's the one who provides the sign off attesting that it's independent and it's actually accurate. And lastly, we have the fund transfer report. And when it comes to fund transfers, it's basically an inevitable process of school operations. Many times it could be that certain expenses went over what was initially budgeted, or we actually had to right size to actually shave off from one account to fund another. For example, if we had a bus that needed to be repaired and we didn't have the funding that we budgeted originally for that, so we will look at another operating line to actually fund that repair and then increase that budget line to cover the expense. So how do we read the board secretary report? There are a few, it's broken down by a few sections. The first section is Fund 10, which is our general operating fund. Fund 20 is our special revenues. So here we'll have any type of federal funding, Title I, ESSER. We also have our student activity accounts, and that's going to be our Verona High School finance account, our HBW finance account, and our athletics. We also have our Fund 30, which is capital projects, and Fund 40, which is debt services. So for example, the referendum, we went out and got bonds to fund the 27 million. That will be actually listed in the Fund 40 line along with prior referendums. On the other side, we have our cash reports, and basically the cash reports is a list of revenues and then appropriations or expenditures that will be listed out in those reports. And to complete the presentation, I gave you guys a snapshot of the reports that are available to the public and gets posted on the website. On the top, you'll see this is actually the cash balance for the month of December. And that will always match what the treasurer actually has as the ending cash balance for the month of December. So just wanted to highlight that, and I'm ready for any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you, Mr. Cruz. I don't have a question per se, but I do want to thank you for that. And maybe this is a question that could come up during the finance committee. When you were talking about revenue and how we generate revenue, we do have a couple of tuition students, as Mr. Day said. And I believe at one point, and this was interrupted, I believe, with pandemic, was we were renting our facilities to a Mandarin program on the weekend. So I don't know if that resumed. And as mandates are lifting and things are loosening up, if that's something that we're going to revisit. So maybe that could be talked about in finance committee. And I know there's a lot of advertisements in our Friday folder. If that's still generating revenue, if that's active. So just kind of an overall snapshot of what we are bringing in as revenue. And I think for public, two recent examples of second questions were getting Dr. Moriello and that whole mental health and the ESS team that came out of public support, out of a second question, as did full day kindergarten. So when it's those things that are really big, it does go out for a public vote. Other than that, does anybody on the board have any comments or questions for Mr. Cruz?
I do. So I saw Fund 25 through 27 is for, I guess, special funding for VHS and HBW and then other activities. Is there a reason why the 4 elementary schools are not part of that?
So the student activity accounts, usually with elementary school, because the SCA is super involved, a lot of those student activity accounts actually flows through the SCA. The schools themselves don't have a student activity account set up. So basically what a student activity account is a separate checking account where the school actually does their fundraising and collect funds, and then they actually manage the treasury and finance to actually cover the expenses. Right now, with the implementation of the new system, we've brought basically this twofold. GASB 84 requires this is right now the state of New Jersey requires schools to report those student activity accounts in their board secretary report. So the board secretary report for the month of January will be our first board secretary report that's going to have the student activity accounts listed. So going forward, you'll probably see those, and that is actually something new for us now. And our auditors, they did actually mention this last year, but because of the old system, we weren't able to implement the requirement at the time.
So is that like, is that standard practice that the student activity funds are solely to middle or junior high schools and then high schools, or?
No. So if we wanted, we could actually create student activity accounts in each school. To be honest with you, I'm not sure like the volume of transactions that will happen, because I guess the principals, they rely on the SCA to actually cover that. But if they wanted to, that's something that we could do. We could create a student activity account for each school.
Okay, I mean, maybe that's something to discuss more in finance committee.
Yes.
And I wonder if it wouldn't be prudent to reach out to the 4 elementary SCAs to look at their budgets and see. I mean, obviously the last 2 years have been very different, but in the past, what sort of revenue they've been able to take in and what sort of spending that they've done year to year. I know it's been tough on them. So it's just something that I would encourage to explore.
Absolutely.
Interesting, Mrs. Joppy, that you say that, because years ago, going back, the SCAs at the end of the year would come and present at a board meeting, and we would have an idea of actually the benefit to the school district that the SCAs provide. Like right now, it's a little disjointed. So that would be really nice. Anybody else have any questions? I will take that as a no. And again, thank you, Mr. Cruz, for that. And we're going to continue with the presentations, and we have Dr. Miller, the Director of Curriculum Instruction, and he's going to be discussing Start Strong along with Mr. Stevenson, the Supervisor of STEM, and Ms. Julia Peter, the Supervisor of Humanities.
Okay. Well, good evening. I'd like to welcome everyone, board, superintendent, administrators, and folks in the audience to our presentation tonight for the Start Strong Fall 2021 administration. Okay. We're getting there. Okay, here we go. All right, so let me just minimize this. All right, so the Start Strong Fall 2021 assessments. These were done in lieu of, we had a waiver, not a waiver, but last spring, we did not administer the NJ. I feel like I want to turn this a little bit so I can see the crowd as well. We didn't have to take the 2021 spring NJSLA. So instead, New Jersey applied for a waiver, and we were granted the privilege of administering the fall 2021 Start Strong assessments in October. A little information about them. They were administered quickly in person. They provided immediate results. They were done for language arts, mathematics, and science, representing the 2020-21 school year. What they didn't replace though was that since they were short, they didn't replace local-based benchmark assessments, and they didn't replace what's coming up this spring in a few months, which is the 2022 NJSLA assessments, and they were not supposed to be predictive of the NJSLA coming up this spring. Start Strong test design based on a subset of prioritized prior academic standards to provide a data point on the level of support a student may need to engage in grade level content. We have two examples. So we're in grade 5, and this was a little confusing to us when we read this in the summer, but for students that were in grade 5 this fall, they took an assessment for grade 4, which makes a lot of sense for ELA. When we got to algebra, when we got to geometry, algebra 2, it was broken down into strands from the 8th grade standard. So it wasn't, so if for example, an algebra 1 assessment was taken by students, it referred back to the algebraic standards that were from grade 8. Used released high quality items, so the questions were actually released ahead of time. Contained efficient question types to produce on-demand results for educators. Could be administered in a short amount of time. Normally, it's about 3 hours to administer an assessment. Normally 2 to 3 units. This was 1 unit for 45 to 60 minutes. And just want to stress again that they did not cover the breadth and depth of all the standards. It's just not possible in 45 to 60 minutes. So Start Strong grade and content alignment. Like I said before, the English language arts was grades 4 to 10. Normally it's grades 3 to 9. But since we didn't take the test last spring, we took it this fall. So it carried over to the students as they moved up a grade level. And mathematics, grades 4 to 8. And 8 tends to have an asterisk because sometimes in 8th grade, students may be taking algebra or geometry. And at the high school, they would have algebra, geometry, and algebra 2. And for science, it's normally benchmark years are 5, 8, and 11. But since we moved it to the fall, students in grades 6, 9, and 12 took the assessment. And the description at the bottom I've already gone into, but if a student was taking algebra or geometry, it depends what grade 8 standards they were asked when they were given the fall Start Strong assessment. Interpretation considerations. Start Strong assessments provide a data point to support district level curriculum planning and revisiting prerequisite concepts and skills. So it's kind of like implied in the name, Start Strong. So it's supposed to be like an early warning signal for teachers, like maybe they can hone in on certain skills that may be missed, or need to be revisited. Evaluating scope and sequence based on distribution of student support needs, which we'll get into a little later. And providing professional development learning supports for differentiation and scaffolding based on student results, which we'll also show you in a slide later on in the presentation. Start Strong result interpretation considerations continued. They're called ISRs. So using the individual student reports for conversations between parents and educators on where their child might need support at the beginning of the school year. We also have other assessments that check this as well. And as per the Department of Education, assessment data should be analyzed alongside other important measures of student outcomes like benchmark assessments, teacher-created formative assessments, which can be daily, summative assessments, attendance data, etc. Number of students tested. This was a very pleasing statistic. Pretty much all of our students took this assessment. We had only a few students miss throughout the grade levels, so we were nearly 100% throughout the grade levels, and we'd like to thank everyone for their support. It was nice that we could do this. It was done quickly, and we're proud that everyone showed up and took the assessment. And the score levels are a little, the support levels is what they're called, are a little different than normally the score, the scale. So the scale for the NJSLA is normally 1 through 5, with 4 and 5 considered passing scores. This was like an early warning or, a signaling test of maybe what students need to focus on. So we color coded them. So red would be more support. That would be a 1. Some support needed would be a 2. And what we have here in the bullets is if it was more support, the idea is normally a student would earn a 1 or a 2 on the NJSLA. Some support needed was approaching expectations, which is a 3 on an NJSLA. And less support needed was someone who would be considered to pass NJSLA, but with the asterisks that this doesn't really measure all of the standards. It just focuses on some that they thought would be important for the beginning of the year. So with that being said, I'd like to call up Mrs. Peter, and she can talk about English language arts.
Yeah. So given the three levels of supports that that the test provided for teachers to understand where their students fell across ELA, these were the outcomes we saw across grades 4 through 10 in English language arts. And we're really pleased to see that there's mostly continued growth from our 4th graders up to our 10th graders, with about 2/3 of our students falling into the less support needed, which, I know less support may be concerning to some parents because that word support is still in that phrase, but that's where we'd like our students to fall. And we're very pleased that about 2/3 or more of our students fell into that category by the time that they reached high school. This speaks to our outstanding teachers and our outstanding students who really did the best that they could in a really challenging time. And we're pleased to see the results that we saw given the difficult time that came before our Start Strong assessment. The state also asked us to report on our students' scores across several subgroups. One being gender and race and ethnicity. So these are our scores across those categories just in the ELA section of our test, which mostly mirrored our general district scores. They also asked us to report subgroups for students who have an IEP and who have a 504, our students who are currently receiving services for ESL, students who formerly received ELL services, and then students based on economic category, which we're not surprised to see this. We know that some of these students require additional support, and we'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about some of the supports that are in place to help these students achieve growth throughout this school year and beyond.
Good evening. Thanks for having me here. Looking at math outcomes, I'm not sure these are totally surprising. Math is lagged behind ELA for some time. We've been working on it diligently, trying to reframe how we teach math, how we assess math, how we engage kids in math. A lot of research from NWAA, which Charlie will talk about in a little bit, that we've partnered with a program of continuous testing, has kind of indicated that math took kind of a larger hit within the pandemic. The high yield modes of teaching and learning math were just not as accessible in virtual or hybrid settings. The one point that I think is a bit of a bright spot would be the less support needed category on 4th grade there. This follows the 2nd year of implementation of Dimensions Math in 3rd grade, which is where we launched 2.5 years ago. And it looks like that focus of kind of a process of think, learn, do, and kids engaging in rich problems and discussion is paying off. And as we work through sort of the generations of kids, I think we'll see those numbers shift over time. Looking at the subgroups For the most part, each subgroup mirrors the district pattern. You'll notice there's a few that aren't reported. That means there were less than 20 individuals in those categories, and so it's not statistically, we're told not to report when it's less than 20 because those results wouldn't be statistically valid. The further subgroups, this looks at the IEP students, 504s, ELLs, etc. And again, we can see the challenges that IEP kids have with math. There are portions of these exams that were just as much reading as they were math. And so for certain kids, it could be kind of a double challenge. And likewise, I think we see that with our English language learners. In science, there's a mistake there. That should be grades 6, 9, and 12, not 6, 5, and 12. And you can kind of see the profile breakdown. Some of the science questions were multiple parts. And we'll get there. Subgroups, same kind of pattern. Again, some categories aren't reported because there's less than 20 in the category. There's aspects of the science test, again, that are very much reading and interpreting data and then answering questions based on those things. And I think we see for those students who are English language learners or IEPs, there's kind of a double struggle there. You're right. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Stevenson. We think there's some bright spots from this assessment that we'd like to share with the folks who are here in the crowd and on stage. This is, when we started the park assessment, it seemed like it was a lifetime ago. I believe it was 2013, 14. What we asked as educators was, if you're going to make an assessment, can the teachers actually see the assessment when it's done? And the answer was no. That the test bank wasn't large enough, and advanced placement does that. They do share questions. And we thought, we even decided, I think in 15, 16, we designed it ourselves and we shared it with the county. It was, at the time, it was Mr. Stevenson and Dr. Bangia. And everybody in the county, like, this is a great idea. So we actually sent it down to the Department of Education, because sometimes you'll get results and it just has like a bar graph for you. That doesn't really tell a teacher what to fix. So what we're proud to say for the Start Strong, and you get kind of giddy when you look at this, because it's kind of neat. We have a couple of pictures for you to see. So you can go into what's called Pearson Access Next, and Mr. Balaj and I love going to that website, right, Mr. Balaj? And what was really neat about this is that you could go, this was called the results by question report. And you could look at the number incorrect if you're a classroom teacher or if you're a grade level. And what a teacher wants to see immediately is, where did the kids get the one question that like the most incorrect responses? So I have a little arrow here. It points to, it was question 5. It was called reasoning with equations and inequalities. So that alone makes people shake. It's a little scary, but it's actually kind of cool. So 88% of the kids, so 9 out of 10 students didn't get this question correct. And overall, there are 145 responses. So we posted a picture of what the question looks like, which is amazing. And they actually have the standard, and I have an arrow that points to it as well. And you see the question, and the question says the graph of the equation y equals 2x minus 1 is shown in the coordinate plane. Which lists contain only points that lie on the graph of y equals 2x minus 1? And I couldn't fit the whole question on there. But what's really neat is you can see the question and you can be like, oh, so this is maybe where there's a little lag or where there's a little fog for students. But what's cool is when you go to the next slide, this is really cool. It should be like a drum roll. There's student performance level by item. And what's neat is you can click on show responses and we see a student response. here, and this is from ELA, and like it actually drills down to every single student. So teachers can see how every single student answered each question. And we'll get into more questions with you, but what is neat is that standardized tests are still limited in the fact that sometimes it's all or none. It's either all right or all wrong. But the questions they sometimes ask, they'll say, well, pick 2 answers that are correct. And as we analyze them with teachers and administrators, we noticed it was all or none, but they actually had half of the question right. So it's interesting sometimes when you see results, they can be a bit deceiving. So that's why it's important to dig down and look at the language of the question and how it's asked. And we can, in a way, adapt that when we create assessments ourselves. So we thought that was pretty neat. We hope this trend continues for the spring of 22. I've not received a comment yet about that, because I do ask, because I think it's important that our teachers actually see what questions are asked aside from just the standard, and where a student may struggle. It's important to know that as an educator. So now I'll come back to Mrs. Peter, and we're going to share with you just a couple of examples of like what the questions look like, you know, by the grade bands 3, 4, and 5 through 8 in high school.
Again, so this is a question from our 4th grade ELA assessment. This is question number 10. There were only 10 questions on the ELA assessments across 4th through 10th grade, but many of the questions had multiple parts and gave students opportunities to dive a little bit deeper into a single longer passage rather than 10 different passages across the test, which I think is helpful for students, though could be challenging if their background knowledge isn't as strong in some of those areas. I did link this passage if you'd like some light reading this evening on the excavation of the woolly mammoth. That's there for your perusal. But this is what a student's screen might look like here at the bottom corner. So the passage is on one side of the screen with those 2 questions, part A and B. On the right, students can scroll through the passage and refer to it, hopefully frequently, as they're answering those questions. This particular question asks students to determine the main idea and then select evidence or key details to support their assessment of the main idea of this passage. This was a nonfiction text. I pulled a grade 6 ELA question. This happened to be question number 2. It's from a passage called Lost and Found in the Black Hole. And in this particular question, students were asked to analyze characters, the 2 characters, Darren and Mr. Grabber from the story, and analyze how they were similar and how they differ. And then additionally, select 2 pieces of text evidence, one to support their assessment of Darren and one to support their assessment of Mr. Grabber and how they were similar and different throughout the story. It's a challenging question, but one that we can really dig into with our teachers and think about how we're asking students to analyze characters across their own stories. So it gave us a lot of great opportunity for conversation about ways that we can ask our students to do this sort of work in their own text or in some of our mentor texts. The last question I'll share with you is from a grade 9 ELA assessment. It's question number 5. This passage is called Chew on This. It's actually a book that dives into the fast food industry. And students were asked to just assess the main idea of the first paragraph in the passage, and then additionally find supporting evidence to confirm that main idea is correct. This highlighted for us, which we already knew, that asking our students to identify supporting evidence is particularly important and a skill we continue to hone in on and practice in our classes. But it sparked a lot of great conversations with our teachers about ways that we can do this with the students, not to prepare them necessarily for these types of tests, but to help them feel prepared when they encounter these types of questions. So now I'll turn it back over to Matt.
And I brought you some fractions. Right? A serving of carrots is 3/4 of a cup. How many cups are in 7 servings of carrots? This is a 4th grade standard, 4th grade question. Our early 5th graders took it. And actually, there's a whole host of different strategies that they could get at this. One of the things that we've been teaching is that the denominator is the unit and the numerator is the count, and that's why it's called the numerator. And so they could simply, as long as they're keeping things straight, multiply the 3 times 7 and get 21/4. And enter the 21/4, and they're good. And they could convert that also to 5 1/4. Or they could even model it, because one of the strengths of the dimensions program is using modeling to sort of let the math emerge from the problem. And so they could just start drawing 3/4 lengths bars and see, after they've drawn 7 of them, kind of simply count and find the equivalent in terms of a whole number and a fractional part that's left over. This is a question from the grade 6 math assessment. And again, this was based on 5th grade standards and 5th grade learning of our early 6th graders. This one is about rectangular prisms. And the part A was about just length and width and height, reading the diagram of the smaller of the 2 rectangular prisms. I was concerned when I saw this, because you have to pick 4 as the length, 3 is the width. I'm sorry, 2 is the width and 3 is the height. And I was concerned that our kids would get penalized if they didn't put them in that proper order. I went through, I forget how many different students to find somebody who put them in a different order, but got the numbers right. And I was pleased that even if you put 2, 3, 4 in any order, you got credit. And so they weren't penalized for, oh, I thought the length was the width or the width was the height or those types of things. Part B is about just calculating the total volume of both of them. I bring you the volume of a cone now. The algebra, geometry, algebra 2 are given formula sheets. You can see the formula for a cone there, and I'm sure you know it from memory. Volume is 1/3 pi r squared times the height of the cone. And so really it's just plugging all those things in and doing your algebraic manipulations, because the initial prompt gives you the volume. And so now you have to understand how to reconfigure that and do the algebra to come out with the missing height. Part 2 changes the height, changes the radius. Now you have to find the new volume. Here's a grade 6 science question. This is about forces in motion. There's 3 investigations sort of demonstrated on the left there. Investigation 1, 2, and 3, various people pushing on a box. And then they have to interpret a question about investigation 3 and select 2 of the 5 statements. I think it was a little bit of a surprise to all of us when we found out on questions like this, there were no partial credit. So even though it says select 2, you pick 1, you got that right, but didn't select another one, you didn't get credit for the question. And I found that a little surprising. I think our classroom practice would be, if a kid gets 1 right, even though they have to pick 2, you give them partial credit. State didn't do that. Here's a grade 9 question. Looking at waves and the transmission of waves, there's an experimental setup with an artificial eardrum. And then what happens in response to the sound waves? Again, it's a select 2 of the 5 statements. And then finally, I did find a chemistry question. Chemistry seems to be a little bit more neglected in these tests. And this one was really simply understanding the periodic table and the patterns that are in it, and being able to develop a formula for strontium chloride based on the positions of elements on the periodic table. And I think this is Dr. Miller again, correct? Chemistry and fractions. I hope that.
Yes, thank you. So we're nearing the end of our presentation. We just wanted to talk about some intervention strategies that we've been doing recently. Bless you in the audience. Students in grades 1 through 8 were administered the MAP growth assessments for mathematics and reading in the fall. We started with this last winter, and then in the spring with the middle school. And we feel confident by using this. This is a growth-oriented test. So this will allow students some time to go as far as the test can take them. So it's really neat. It's something different we've never used, but it really shows where students have strengths and where they really need help. So we're pleased to be using this. The results were shared with teachers and parents. Parents, it's called a family report. We will do another one in February, which will actually show growth from the fall to the winter. That will be by the end of the month. Teachers use results to differentiate their instruction with reading and math. The way the MAP growth reports look is that you can sort by standard or by topic, and you can actually group students either heterogeneously or homogeneously, depending upon the decision and strategy used by the teacher. And learning from Dr. Moriello, because he was the first to use Ed Benham's exact path. We using ESSER funds are using Edmentum for the next 2 years to see what we can get out of this. And what's nice is that this again connects, Dr. Fernari spoke of this, it connects with MAP. And it's amazing. It assigns the 4 areas that are skill areas that are deficient in reading and math, and students can work on these areas. And it's interactive, it's pretty neat, and it really helps the teacher with differentiation. It doesn't replace instruction, but it supplements it. It's a pretty neat piece, and we're excited to be using it. And our teachers are becoming more familiar with it every day. And then I just want to mention again that what we've been doing in our work with Mr. Bill Jackson with Singapore Math, we're really getting students at the elementary. We're moving into the middle now to understand conceptually how math works and to not be afraid of it. Most students and most parents I talk to, when you say math, they tend to look the other way. We're trying to teach our students that failure is a good thing, meaning that you can go with your instincts, and if you're wrong, that's okay. We learn from our mistakes. The brain-based research tells us this, and it's okay to learn. It's actually how our brain grows, and that's what leads to the idea of a growth mindset. So we're working on the understanding of mathematics with our younger students in grades K, 1, and 2 on the idea of learning what's called supination, and the idea that kids can look at things. We use what's called a concrete, pictorial, abstract, a CPA approach, and students actually play games to learn and see numbers that are base 10. And it's amazing when it's taught this way instead of memorizing and looking for patterns, they actually pick it up. They understand it probably better than we do, because we were not taught this way as children. I'm 48 and I was definitely not taught this way. I was lucky to be fast with math, but not to really understand it. And I think a lot of our students now are starting to see, like, I think I understand this. And it's kind of exciting when you see aha moments with our younger students. So we do a lot of work on that. And again, the idea of problem solving, students are to try math by themselves. The idea is to increase their math stamina. And then they can work with a partner, which has been proving challenging with COVID. This is a constructivist approach that we're trying, and constructivism requires that teachers be around kids and kids talk and they work with manipulatives. And the idea of reading, as Mr. Stevenson's mentioned before, is highly important when you're reading math. Our engineers, scientists, mathematicians have to read in order to work with reasoning. More intervention strategies, working with Dana Clark with balanced literacy. And again, the idea of balanced literacy is to balance. I'm a student from the 80s. It was all phonics. I could spell anything and I knew grammar. I knew the 75 prepositions. 90s, right? Mrs. Peter was about whole language, and it was like, you know, people call it flowery, but it was nice. You could just write. It had strengths to it. Balanced literacy is taking the strength of both of them, along with teacher feedback, allowing students to write, allowing students to rewrite, commenting on student writing, supporting them, working with different groups, book clubs, shared readings, using the whole menu at different times, and really getting students to fall in love with reading and writing is really the goal. Because most of us can be excellent readers and writers, we just have to practice with this idea. So that's what we're working on. And the idea of conferencing is big, but it is not easy, and it is intimidating to teachers, because you have to talk to a lot of students and they read different books, especially as they get older. So it's a challenge and we work on that with modeling and group work. I went over the results by question report, which was really cool. And the teachers actually really enjoyed it. They're like, wow, it's the first time I can actually see how my students answered the standardized test. And department meeting time has been utilized to review these questions and to really sit back and think and go, you know, I don't think I even taught that last year. Last year was a tough year on many fronts. We did have kids in, we had a lot of kids out, and it was a lot of in and out teaching. They used the term hybrid, but we really say that's deceiving. It was really like dual teaching, trying to teach in the classroom and home. And it is, as we know from science, it's impossible to do two things at once. Well, it's hard to teach teaching kids at home and in the classroom. And finally, classwork, homework, quizzes, and tests will be adjusted, as we find and learn different ideas. The idea, and honestly, what teaching really is, it's about 90% reflection and about 10% preparation and delivery. Like, you have to learn and you have to be there listening actively to kids. And that's what our best teachers do. They really reflect and they improve and they change their lessons daily. And that's what we have for you tonight. If anyone has any questions, we're here to answer them.
So I have a comment.
Sure.
And I think that I think the three of you clearly understand this topic really, really well. And I think your presentation was very well prepared. I would just caution the district about having so many intervention strategies based on a test that was 10 questions long in some cases. And we spent about as much time reviewing this as our kids had at this board meeting as our kids had to show their content mastery over the course of the year. So I think this is a piece of data, but statistically, it's such a small piece of data. And so I'm hopeful that, these intervention strategies are part of a bigger trend.
Sure.
But, this test is a farce of what it could have been based on the circumstances that we were put in by the state. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Dr. Miller? No, I am going. Mrs. Drappi? So I'm going to say thank you to our administrators that was a lot of information. And this report will be up on our website as well. We could go back and look through this.
Yeah.
All right, excellent. Thank you very much. All right. Continuing on, we have Mr. Dan Roberts. He is the board attorney, and he is going to share some legal updates. There's been a lot of changes in New Jersey.
There have. I'm going to highlight just a few of those changes tonight. The first and probably biggest is the lifting of the mask mandate as of March 7th. Hold your applause. Based on a dramatic decline in the number of COVID-19 infections, the governor determined that lifting the mandate was appropriate, but also gave the state a 30-day window to develop new guidance to assist districts with this change. While the state will no longer require masks to be worn in school, each local district still maintains the ability to require that they be worn. It's important to note that yesterday's announcement has not yet been reduced to an executive order. Once that order is made available, I will provide an update to the board administration. Beyond that, the legislature addressed student school board members. Starting next school year, all school districts with a high school will be required to have one student representative on the board. This representative will be considered a non-voting member of the board and will either be elected or appointed by the student. The process for electing or appointing the student member is to be developed by the superintendent in consultation with the student body at large. This student member will be responsible to attend school board meetings and keep students informed of the board's actions by a monthly report to their student council. The legislature then went on to make some technical changes to the harassment, intimidation, and bullying law. Nothing substantive. You have to revise your HIB policy to provide that after the first or second act of HIB, a copy of the results of the investigation must be placed in the student's file. After a third or subsequent act, the principal, in connection with other appropriate staff, must develop an individual student intervention plan for the student and may also require that the student complete a class or training program to reduce acts of HIB. Additionally, the state will be developing a form for principals to use to notify the superintendent of all acts of HIB, as well as incidents that do not technically qualify. The law clarified that where an incident is determined by the principal to be outside of HIB, that incident still must be reported to the superintendent. And the superintendent now has the ability to require that an investigation be completed if the superintendent believes it may constitute an act of HIB. The legislature also addressed school security drills and student well-being. There was a concern among some members of the legislature about student well-being before and after these drills. To address this, schools must now include developmentally and age-appropriate messaging to students that the event is only a drill and that no danger exists. Additionally, written notice must be provided to parents and guardians by the end of the school day that a drill took place. This law is effective immediately. The legislature then went on to pass 2 laws concerning curriculum. The first involved Asian American Studies. This law modified the state's Commission on Asian Heritage to now include not just Asian heritage, but also Asian American heritage. The law directs the commission to provide assistance to schools to implement Asian and Asian American historical, cultural, and educational programs, and to infuse the history of Asian Americans into the social studies curriculum in order to provide an accurate, complete, and inclusive history. This law also takes effect immediately. The second curriculum-related law involves Asian American and Pacific Islander studies. Similar to the previous, the legislature also directed that school districts must include instruction on the history and contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders in an appropriate place in the curriculum for students K to 12. Districts must seek the advice of the Commission on Asian Heritage regarding this curriculum, and that takes effective the start of the next school year. To ease the hiring crunch, the legislature is now allowing school districts to hire retired staff members. For school years 21-22 and 22-23 only, school districts may hire retired teachers or professional staff members providing special services such as speech language specialists or therapists. Retired staff members hired under this law for critical needs positions do not have to re-enroll in the pension system, but they can only be hired for a maximum of 2 years. This law also takes effect immediately. Finally, while there hasn't been any major school ethics decisions which would impact the board, I believe it is helpful to remind the board of your obligations under the School Ethics Act, particularly with regard to social media and electronics communications. As board members, you are free to express your opinions on school district business. However, please remember that no one board member speaks for the board. Communications with constituents where you express your opinion should always include a disclaimer that those opinions are yours, that they may not reflect the opinion of the board, and that you are not speaking for the board. To the extent that you may receive complaints from members of the public, the Code of Ethics requires you to refer them to the Chief School Administrator. And that concludes my legal update.
Excellent. Thank you, Mr. Roberts. Does anybody have any questions on any of those updates?
I say it was very educational, but I think maybe we need to have this more frequently, just so every once in a while, every quarter, maybe have an update with the latest and greatest. I would just, yeah, I got to get a better mask next time. I feel like I got like 5 layers on. End of the day, I'd like to see if we can do this quarterly so we can have, get an update, because I think a lot of these things happen and on the fly, a lot of things change, and I want to make sure that we are privy to that. So I appreciate that. So.
I think that's a good idea, Mr. Day, on having a regular legal update as well. I think it's helpful. And a lot of these are driven to policy, because then Strauss Esme is going to push out policies that kind of keep us up to date with the laws, and that comes through our education committee and so forth. All right, so we are going to move on to our committee reports. We have Mrs. Drappi and Mr. Walker. Did education meet?
Hi, yes. Just get to my notes back here. Okay. Couple updates. I think the bulk of our conversations surrounded around a plethora of policy updates, most which were mandated and can be found in the public folder. And they are first readings. That's resolution number 5. A lot of it was updated language. and just updated dates for requirements. We discussed the updated scope and sequence for elementary conflict resolution, which was very extensive, created by Dr. Lanzo. Dr. Fenari already discussed in her super report about the DEI coordinator and facilitators receiving their proposals and looking at those. The mathematics coach begins tomorrow in grades 2 and 3 at all 4 elementary schools weekly. ELA report cards are currently being revised, and additional time will be given on February 17th for the PD day and February grade level meetings. The ELL 3-year plan is completed and updated for until 2024, and that is also on tonight. I forgot to write down what resolution that was. Number 8, yes. Thank you. Resolution number 8. Thank you. Map growth assessments were already discussed by Dr. Miller. The elementary schools in HVW over the next 2 weeks will be taking their next map growth assessments. The Start Strong presentation just happened. Thank you for that. February 17th is the next PD day, looking at map growth results and how to implement Edmonton, which is related to the map growth, articulation meetings, professional development for social studies, and more elementary report card revision. Math PD will be February 23rd and February 24th, grades 2 and 1, grades 3 and 5 respectively. We're having parent nights for grades 1 and 2 on February 23rd at 7 p.m. and then a parent night for grade 5, February 24th. If you have children in those grades, I highly encourage you to attend those. Singapore math is no joke, but once we get the hang of it, it can take us very, very far. It's very, very different than what the way most of us have learned, so it can be incredibly helpful. Still working on the CRDC report. Deadline for completion is the 28th. And just some personnel staff changes. We do want to say I guess, best of luck, and you will be missed, to Miss Scatoletta, our Director of Guidance, who has submitted her resignation effective on or about May 6th. We wish her well. She will be sorely missed, and good luck on your next adventure. And the ESL 3-year plan was completed. Our mental health speaker series with Erin Bruno on February 24th has been changed to Zoom only. I believe the new flyer went out. So it will be virtual only. She is unable to make it in person, unfortunately. And the lottery for the preschool enrollment took place yesterday. And I think that was it. Did I miss anything, Mr. Waka? Okay, thank you.
Any questions or comments in regard to that? No, then we're going to go on to facilities, and that's Mr. Day and Mrs. Drappi.
That's down. We already went through the HVAC scenario that Mrs. Prisco had brought up. So again, that's going to be tested and ready to rock and roll. The only other thing that we spoke about was the status of the VHS gym, the gym floors to be exact, due to the water damage. So we're still getting quotes. Either quotes, we're getting quotes to repair, or we're also getting quotes to replace, and based off the analysis of what's the best way to go and the costs, we'll sort that out. So again, that's still in flight. Mr. Higgins is working diligently on that, and hopefully I'll have some more feedback for next meeting. That's all we have.
all we have. Any questions or comments on that? If not, we're going to move on to athletics, and I am going to allow Mrs. Prisco.
Thank you. I'll go quick on this. We did meet and winter sports is in session, as we all know, and most of the senior nights have happened for winter sports. Tomorrow evening is senior night for the boys basketball team at 6 p.m. at home. I believe that's the last senior night that's taking place. Let's see. Good news to report for anyone who is involved in the track. Our track will now just be used for Verona students as of March 5th. So it will just be for the Verona students. And we talked about swim team. They came to us about pay to play. So that's just in discussion. On February 22nd, there will be a girls fundraiser basketball game, Cedar Grove versus Verona High School girls here. And also I found out tonight or today actually that on Thursday, the girls basketball team, Lauren Kobernek, who's a senior here, she got the NJSIAA Woman of the Year Award. So she's going to be presented that on Thursday evening. They play Newark Academy at 4 p.m. So congrats to her. And there's 2 field trips that are scheduled for the high school, the band trip to Philadelphia and Camelback Resort, end of March. And then the DECA at the Harris Conference Center, February 28th to March 2nd. And I think that's it.
I think if I remember correctly, and I have my notes, there's going to be hosting the Cedar Grove basketball game as a fundraiser.
Yes, I said that.
Oh, you did say that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Cedar Grove, Verona High School, February 22nd.
Okay. I didn't
Girls
hear you.
game. Mhm.
Yeah, I think you got everything on that. Are there any questions regarding athletics?
Go Hillbillies.
No. And then community resources, we did not meet. We reported out at the last meeting, so that could just come off. And at this point, we're going to open it up to public comments on agenda items. So anything that is on the agenda as a resolution that's being voted on, if anybody has any comment on that, so please come to the podium and state your name and address, please. And please reference the resolution number that you're speaking to.
Good evening, Dan Vecchio, West Lincoln Street, Verona. I have a comment first and then a question that Mr. Roberts addressed briefly. My first comment is the presentation on idling. The board seemed very receptive, so we'll be looking forward to you guys walking to work and businesses. Auto start when it's single digit weather and 100-degree weather will knock on your window, as Ms. McLavoy alluded to, and advise you guys to turn your cars off.
Excuse me,
I-
this is for
Okay.
resolutions?
Yeah, well, I find it ironic. She links that to public health with the kids, and the kids have been wearing masks for 2 years. So I'd like to digress into Governor Murphy's lifting of the mask mandate as of March 7th.
So
I'm sorry?
This part of public comment is just for things that the board is going to vote on tonight. You can make that comment when we go back again to.
Well, I have a question for you guys, and it's important because I feel like it's detrimental to our kids'
That's
health.
fine, but which resolution?
Is there
are you
any
referencing?
reason on March 7th
I'm not,
that our kids will still be required to wear masks?
that's not an action item for tonight.
So you're not going to answer that question?
When you can come back,
Why isn't that on the agenda? I think that's on both sides, it's a very important issue.
This is for what
But
we're,
I just want to know the process. He
So-
lifted, you mentioned the executive order. Does he need
This
to
is-
lift the executive
excuse
order?
me, this is for, we have to vote on the resolutions. So your comment and question are noted, but that's not for this part of the meeting.
Okay, so
anything
will
that we're-
somebody be responding to me?
Somebody might, or as we said, this mask mandate, everything is not in order yet. It hasn't been made an executive order. and it's going to depend
Well,
upon.
that's what I'm trying to figure out. Does he need to make an executive order or lift an executive order? I mean, can you
To answer your
digress a
first
little bit?
question?
So just, yeah. So he would execute another executive order that would rescind parts of other executive orders. But it has to be
Okay.
formalized.
So once
have
he
not seen it
does
yet.
that, is there any reason our kids will be masked on the 7th?
That is a policy decision for this board, not for me.
So the answer is there is a possibility.
That you direct that question to the board.
Okay, well, I'd like to, please.
The process.
Yes, on March 7th. So you had
Yeah.
did you find something funny?
No, Mr. Vecchio, I will take that question.
Okay.
Okay,
Okay,
normally.
because this is serious.
Yes, I know.
Okay, we take this serious.
And so do we.
And the condensation, how
Mr.
you guys
Vecchio,
look down at us.
May I answer?
Yes,
Okay, so just before I do, just for protocol's sake, normally, and I think Mrs. Fresky and Mr. Roberts were trying to say, there are 2 public comment sections in the agenda. This question is normally more appropriate to the second public comment, but we'll take your question now.
okay, I appreciate that because the next meeting, will that be
Next meeting
beyond
is
the 7th?
No, the next meeting is actually the 22nd of February.
The 22nd?
Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be,
So there are
so
a
my question
Yeah.
is, the governor said we can lift the mask mandate. Is there any reason our kids would be required to wear masks on the 7th?
Okay. And I'm going to answer that for you.
Thank you.
What the governor said was that on March 7th, the mandate would be lifted and that school districts, as Mr. Roberts mentioned, would have to make decisions. He also said, and this is where as superintendents of school districts, we always have to be a little cautious because when politicians tell us that there's more information coming, it puts a glitch in my throat, okay? Because I want to make a decision and I want to say to you without equivocation that we can do something. And then if I do that and these guidance measures come out and it might tie my hands. However, what our district is looking at and hoping for is that the mask mandate will be lifted. And we are hoping that when this guidance comes out, that there won't be any restriction to us making masks optional. And the reason I say optional is because there are certain individuals who are immunocompromised that will probably feel more comfortable
I
continuing
am
to wear that mask.
100% for
Yeah.
choice. Right.
Okay.
Okay.
And then, so that's one of the things we consider. Another thing is that there are probably going to be others who may not be immunocompromised, but would feel more comfortable wearing that mask. And then there are other folks that are going to feel that it is more to their benefit and to their children's benefit not to wear them at all. But what I want to say to you is that that is the attitude that we are taking with this. We also have to worry about and be concerned with what those guidance documents that are going to come out from the New Jersey Department of Health and the New Jersey Department of Education are going to tell us. So I'm hoping, and this is my biggest hope, that the restrictions or guidance documents that they send us aren't going to say, yeah, you can have, you don't have to have the masks on. However, you have to have kids be 6 feet apart again. So if they start doing that, it's going to tie our hands. But as far as we are concerned, we are very hopeful that we can make this an optional.
And that will be the decision of the board?
That would be the board with the recommendation of the superintendent and all of the administrators who we spend hours and hours and hours planning through these kinds of things. And we have to look at all of the nuances of the information that we receive and try to do what's best for our students. So as long as that guidance document doesn't tie our hands in other ways, I will say to you that it's our intention to make masks optional.
Dan, if I could, on this particular issue, I'm someone that feels very, very similar to the way you do. Without guarantees right now, I feel very optimistic where we're at now as opposed to where we were even a couple days ago. So, I guess my point is I feel very, very optimistic that we're going to get a result that I think makes sense.
I appreciate that. What is the communication between the governor and the Department of Health with their guidance?
That's something I couldn't even speak to. Those are 2 state agencies that make those plans, at a level that I'm not privy to.
So I guess we shouldn't really get our hopes up for the 7th.
We can be cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously
Is what I will
optimistic,
say. And I wish I could give you more. I really do.
And thank you for your time and for straying from the agenda, because that's an important question, I think, for both sides. It's a big
Agreed.
issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments on the resolutions? If no. Let's see. Do we have any discussion items as a board that's coming up before we do the vote, Mrs.?
I just want to make a quick shout out, comment, or congratulations actually to, it was just announced, the valedictorian and the salutatorian for
Yes.
Verona. This year is Jimmy McHugh, and Anna is the valedictorian, and Annalise Zing, is that how you say her name? Ying. So congratulations to those two high school students on a great accomplishment.
Great, thank you, Mrs. Prisco. On discussion items, I just want to give an update on our superintendent search. So at our last meeting, we reported out that we were able to narrow the field from a slate of 10 candidates down to 5. On Saturday, January 29th, the board met for a special meeting, and we interviewed 5 candidates. And it was an all day from 8:30 in the morning till about 4:30 in the afternoon. We heard from 5 candidates, and we unanimously narrowed that down to 3. So we do have our top 3 candidates. And our next board meeting is a special meeting on February 12th, next Saturday, where we will again spend the whole day doing interviews in person with our top 3 candidates. So that is exciting news. The search firm has been excellent in facilitating the process. Their representative joined us on the calls. We meant to do it in person, and that day was the snowstorm, so we did have to do that via Zoom. And the search firm representative, Dr. Brown, facilitated everything, and it was really smooth. So I look forward to Saturday coming up, looking at our 3 top candidates. And if there is nothing else,
I want to thank the teachers on agenda item 2.6. I know that, I know we're paying them for that extra class. But when you're a classroom teacher and you're as prideful and professional as the Verona teachers always are, getting a new group of kids midway through the year is often very, stressful, and it's tough to establish that rapport, in February or January. So I just want to let them know I really appreciate their professionalism.
thank
I'd
you
like
very much.
to also comment on resolution 15. I'm really happy to see that we are able to provide some compensation to the nurses for their duties outside contractual hours. The heaviest of lifts was done by them, and it's the least we can do to thank them for all of their hours of continued work as the guidelines change seemingly day to day.
Was that it, Mrs. Jaffe? Okay, we're going to move on to roll call for resolutions. I need a motion to accept resolutions number 1 through 19.
So moved.
Moved
Second.
moved by Mrs. Drappi, was that? And second by Mr. Day. Is there any discussion on any of those agenda items before we do a roll call?
I would just like to ask Mr. Cruz about resolution 19. The participation in the Morris Essex Insurance Group for a period of 3 years. That's part of our mandated insurance that you were speaking to earlier?
Yes, so that's the insurance pool that we participate in the county, and basically they provide all property insurance and liability, workers' comp. So that's we've been with them since the 90s. So it's basically a pool that this year has they really have been providing dividends on the return. So like earlier this year, it was over $100,000 that came back from that insurance pool from their last audit. So that they actually got in. So it's definitely been paying off to continue participating in that pool insurance group.
Okay, thank you. And is this the renewal of contract?
Correct.
Okay.
This is the renewal of choosing them for the next 3 years.
Okay, thank you.
And then Mr. Cruz, can you please do the roll call for resolutions?
Yes. Mr. Walker. Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Prusky.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And at this point, we are going to open to public comments on any topic.
So we have addendum.
Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot. We have addendum resolutions number 1 and 2. I need a motion to accept the addendum resolution.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Mrs. Prisco,
Second.
second by Mrs. Drappi. And is there any discussion on those 2 resolutions? No. Mr. Cruz, can you please do the roll call?
Mr. Walker,
Yes.
Mr. Day,
Yes.
Mrs. Drappi,
Yes.
Mrs. Prisco,
Yes.
Mrs. Prusky.
Yes.
We have quorum, motion passed.
Okay, so at this point, we will open up to public comment on any topic. And if you could please state your name and address, and there are 3 minutes per speaker.
Hi, Jackie Fricky, 65 Grove Ave. I have 2 third graders and a second grader at FM Brown, and I would like to happily report what's been going on in my home the past 3 weeks. My third grade daughter, who was noted by her teachers pre-pandemic to be an exceptional writer, is writing again. I could not beg her or bribe her to write simple stories during virtual and hybrid learning, and now her creativity is back. My third grade son is a high achiever who did the bare minimum to get through his list every single day during the pandemic. If he was assigned to read for 10 to 20 minutes, it was always 10. If there was any optional work, he'd refuse it and tell me it's optional. Last week, he asked me to write 10 3-digit multiplication problems for him. And when he was done, he said, well, now I knew what I can do when I'm bored. My second grade daughter is pulling her schoolwork out of her backpack when we get home, showing it to me with pride, reading her writing work to me, showing me her quizzes, all voluntary. All 3 of them are asking each other about their days, laughing while we're walking home from school. When I ask them about school at dinner, I'm getting stories, not one-word answers. They are humming while they do their homework. They are singing while they play. They have this joyfulness to them that I have not seen in 2 years. I looked at my husband last week and I actually said, I feel like our kids are coming back to us. I want to be very clear that this is not an example of kids being resilient, which has been a difference for the past 2 years to any concern. Of kids who put in deliberate and focused hard work and discipline to follow or set for them. It's an example of teachers who have not given up, who have worked 10,000 times harder to engage these kids. It's also an example of school staff and the district taking steps to make forward progress in any small way that we can. And I say this with acute awareness that my kids are likely the exception to the rule. I know the work is not for them. I know there are many kids who continue to struggle. Every single step toward progress is important to these kids. And so I am begging you to do whatever you can to maintain forward progress. Every milestone is important to these elementary students. So in the spirit of this forward progress, I have 2 questions. Well, one was answered. I'm happy to hear that you're considering or feeling optimistic rather about the optional masking. And then also in the spirit of forward progress, as we wait for that March 7th date, I was told that the desk shields are used in classrooms as a visual representation of where students should sit to stay in their zone, and that they do not change quarantine guidelines. So if they don't, will you please remove them? We're giving these kids a lot of really well-deserved credit for the work that they've done and to adapting to so many changing rules. They don't need a visual reminder. I think they've proved that to us. So again, I think this progress is library being in the library, it's music being in the music room, it's Spirit Week, it's Christmas concerts, it's everything we've been doing. And I hope that we can maintain that forward progress.
Thank you,
It's a
Mrs. Frick.
continued-
Your minutes are up.
Sure.
You could come back a second time
Okay.
if you want to.
Thank you very much. That was moving. Thank you.
Excuse me, Elton, can you please whoever's approaching Mike, can you pull the mic closer to you? I'm sorry, I'm
sure.
having trouble hearing.
You hear me now?
you.
All right. Good evening, Board of Education in Verona. My name is Jamie Meringue, 76 Park Ave. I'm the father of 2 boys at Brookdale. First and foremost, thank you. I know most of you up here are doing your best, trying to do what's right for our kids. So masking, I know it's a hot topic. The time is now to free the smile, to leave the decision up to those who know best, parents, not politicians. Our district is finally in control. You have the ability to step up and do what's right for our kids, to represent every child and every parent in the District of Verona, to follow science and state guidance. Will Verona choose to make the right decision? The mask mandates will be lifted March 7th. Murphy explains why we can responsibly go back to normality without masks. Reasoning, the continued drop in new cases and hospitalizations from Omicron, continuing increase in vaccination available for kids if parents choose to, and also the weather that begins to warm in March, thus increasing the availability to keep classrooms ventilated. Murphy ends with this powerful statement, quote, "Perhaps most importantly, this will be a huge step back to normalcy for our kids." He is guiding you, the board, to make the right decision for our kids. I'd like to add what Murphy doesn't talk about: conflicting data and studies suggesting that cloth masks provided little to no benefit. CDC's own study in Georgia of 90,000 elementary students summarizing that student masking requirement did not have a statistical impact. Masks also can cause increased anxiety, depression, learning disorders, suicidal thoughts in kids. When we cover the faces of our children and their teachers, we impede communication and kids' ability to learn. So are we just holding on to this false sense of security at this point? In the past day, we've seen over 58 districts already announce mask optional. And where's ours? I ask all of you here today, give the power back to the parents and kids. Let them enjoy being kids with field trips, interacting closely with others, experiencing the nonverbal cues of someone if someone's upset, angry, or happy. Last but not least, the board knows about the video that surfaced of our board president public Facebook post in front of the very parents that she is supposed to be representing. The video our president shared depicting a man hosting a school board meeting using nasty words, including genitalia, mentioning anti-mask parents. And at one point he says, quote, "Are we just running an open mic for crazy? What's going on here?" So my question to our president is anything I've said or any other parents have said at any other board meeting seem crazy to you? Because your posts, including your previous comments about calling other districts reckless for opening schools full days or hinting we have to vaccinate the entire student body, are extreme, providing any clear evidence of its reasoning. We are supposed to trust you with our child's education. Well, that trust has
Sir.
been lost.
Sir, your 3 minutes are up. Thank you.
Let's follow Murphy's sentiment that we could unmask our children and give our kids normalcy. To those still hesitant and wanting to wear masks, we support and respect your decision and kindly ask for you to respect ours. Thank you.
Diana Ferreira, 49 Fells Road. I'm feeling a little emotional after everybody coming up here. So my intention tonight was to come and discuss the MAP assessment benchmarks. However, in light of recent posts made on Facebook, I felt compelled to use this time to address that instead. As an educator myself who sees the impacts of the pandemic day in and day out, I can assure you that parents advocating for their children is no laughing matter. In fact, without parental support, navigating through the past 2 years would have been nearly impossible. And looking at the data, navigating the next 2 years may be equally as challenging. So parents, thank you. We did it. And we will continue to do what we need to do for our children every single day. Let me be clear. I am not the social media police. I don't use social media. And while at one time I was an advocate for its use, I now think that it does more harm than good. And so here I am. I'm speaking tonight in response to videos posted by a Board of Ed member that was mocking parents who choose to speak and ask questions at Board of Education meetings. The fact that there is humor found in mocking parents is upsetting. However, the decision to post several videos on a public platform like Facebook reveals a severe lack of judgment and the lens through which constitutes, and a lens through which constituents in this town are viewed. It appears as though there's a significant lack of respect for the parents in this community, which makes me question the value that is put in our children by such people. As educators, administrators, and Board of Education members, we have a responsibility to lead by way of example. This holds true to our decisions when making comments and posting on social media. Let us not forget that serving in education was a choice that we made. Publicly mocking parents on social media platform reveals such contempt for those parents that it makes it difficult to believe that we're capable of serving our children's best interest. Education holds a special place when it comes to responsibilities and ethics. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes these past 2 years more than ever. But while we are all far from perfect, we must have a moral compass, one that guides us and helps us show up every day with both good intentions and good judgment. This is true especially during difficult times, even when confronted with opinions that we may disagree with. It is in these difficult times when we begin to stray from that moral compass. We must reflect and ask ourselves, am I able to put my own feelings and frustrations aside and serve my community? We all know the saying, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. My concern is, if we are so willing to publicly mock parents, what does that say about our attitudes towards children? Perhaps it's time to reflect. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lenny Armenti, Ann Street in Verona, father of 4. My oldest is in 2nd grade. Wanted to talk about the mandatory mask mandate being lifted in March. I want and we want the mask optional in Verona, just like it is in Cedar Grove. Why is Cedar Grove able to announce that they're going to go optional already? Why are we waiting on guidance from other people and other people who aren't in town? Murphy went on TV last night and embarrassed himself on CNN, not being able to cite any data backing up his mask mandate. There isn't data that backs the mandate. If you look at Florida versus New Jersey, the numbers are the same. One has a mandate, one didn't. The CDC now recognizes that the cloth mask doesn't even provide proper protection. Most of the rest of the country is unmasked and thriving and living life. Stop punishing our children and hurting them socially, psychologically, and educationally. Ultimately, we parents have the hammer. We can unenroll our kids at any time, and we might have to do so. We won't be held hostage by this outrageous overreach. COVID is on par with the flu in terms of risk to kids. The amount of restrictions we place on children is in no way whatsoever commensurate with the risks of COVID. That you've restructured their entire lives and deprived them of their entire last couple of years and deprived them of years of education. I don't think history will look back kindly on the people that did this upon our children. And then I'd also like to comment on President Lisa Fresky's post. I think your post mocking the parents, just like us, parents of these very children that we are here to protect, I think that post should be condemned. And in my opinion, you should be forced to resign. Is this how you set an example as a leader in the community?
Thank you.
Is that the response?
James Stanisi, 60 Linwood Road. I was very disappointed to see the inappropriate content that Lisa Freshy, our very own Board of Education president, posted on her Facebook page. Mocking parents at Board of Education meetings. We just saw it with Danny Vecchio laughing. Vulgar language. This is something you would typically see on a juvenile's Facebook page, not the school board's president. There's no space in our town for this behavior. Not only is this type of behavior inexcusable, it's a slap in the face to all of us parents who've sat on the sidelines for the last 2 years and allowed the board to do their job, sat on the sidelines quietly. Board members work for us, the residents, the taxpayers of Verona. They are elected to provide guidance and support to the parents and guardians of our children. We are in uncharted waters and our children are suffering. Mental health, depression, anxiety, and suicide are at all-time highs. Who knows what else is on the horizon? Someone with the decision-making abilities she displayed by posting something incredibly and obviously inappropriate exhibits she has absolutely no prudence and should in no way, shape, or form be in a position to make decisions about children. We deserve better. Our children deserve better. And you should be forced to resign immediately. Moving on to masks. With respect to recent announcement Governor Murphy made, making masks optional starting March 7th, please, we urge you to follow these guidelines. Our children deserve this. They are the ones who have not only suffered, but sacrificed the most. Neighboring towns have already announced they will allow parents to decide whether or not to mask our children. The decision should be ours, not yours. Please do the right thing and vote yes on optional masks. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Mary Ellen McHugh. My address is 45 Newman Ave here in Verona. I'm not going to talk about masks. I'm here to talk about the swim team. Seems like minor compared to what everyone else is talking about, but it's very near and dear to my heart and to all of the swimmers and their families. My son Jack has been on the team for the past 4 years at Verona High School, and it's been a wonderful experience for him. And my son Michael is in 8th grade, and he's hoping to be swimming for VHS for the next 4 years. Sorry. I have been treasurer for the Verona High School Swim Parents Association for 5 years since the team started. I'm here to let you know that the $500 fee for the team is cost prohibitive to families and creates a barrier to access for athletes based on their ability to pay. I would like to say thank you to the coaches and the new, Coach Jackie Iannucci is the head coach and Lynette Rivera is the assistant coach. She's new this year. They are wonderful with the swimmers and with the families and the entire program. I also want to thank Athletic Director Laura Palmarizzi. She's been phenomenal this year. And of course, Mr. Bob Merkler over the past 3 years. Swim is okay, so we have about 25 to 30 swimmers each year. The cost is about $20,000 per year for the team. Swim families fundraise about half of that cost, and the rest is paid for by the $500 fee per swimmer. Swim is one of only 2 sports at Verona High School that is still pay to play, or as I like to say, pay to swim. Can you please find a way to provide financial support for this team comparable to that of all of the other sports at Verona High School? And I actually have been waiting 2 years to come up and ask you for this support, but because of the pandemic, I thought it seemed like a minor thing. In light of the pandemic, the swim team has been a haven for those kids. It really has. It's been a place where they can be together and do their thing and make friends and be social and not wear a mask in the pool. And it's just been a wonderful experience for all of those kids. I just wish that I, as treasurer, didn't have to turn kids away because of the money. Thank you very much. And Pam, thanks for shout out to Jimmy.
Mr. Cruz, quick question. I just want to make sure I know we can't make any decisions now, but at the last board meeting, we reported about a $1.6 million budget boost. Is that correct? Thank you very much.
Shannon Heffernan, 83 Franklin. I just had 2 questions. One, in the beginning of the meeting, you guys spoke about class size and forecasted class size and classes on the border of requiring either another section being I guess my question was, is the public made aware of that decision-making process? This is new. I only have a kid in first grade. I suspect as a first grader in FN Brown, he is one of the classes that is on the hump of almost being too big. And so I just wanted to understand that process and if parents have input or if it's made public. And then the second question I had was if the guidance from the state that's coming down related to the March 7th mask lifting, how is that affecting COVID exposures in school? If the kids aren't masked anymore, how is a COVID exposure within the classroom going to be handled and how are parents going to be notified? Thanks.
Good evening, good night. It's Mike Dupree, 47 Cypress Avenue. I don't think there's any more to add to the mask optional forecast, and Dr. Fernari's points were valid in terms of ensuring that there's no surprises with the documentation. That being said, I did want to touch on what Mrs. Fricky said in terms of every little step mattering in progress, and just reiterate the situation that our elementary schools still find themselves in, even until March 7th, when the masks hopefully will be optional. And that is the fact that indeed lunch is not able to be had in the lunchroom. Snacks are still within desk shields to keep kids in their place, even though they've been so well behaved for the last 2 years. Music is not in the music room, art is not in the art room. And when emailing, the responses we get from our administrators are that the spatial constraints dictated by the New Jersey Department of Health guidance don't allow us to do some of those things when we see it happening at our middle schools and at our high schools with cohorts of kids that are arguably maybe at higher risk or to transmit or catch COVID, which is still very, very low in terms of risk to your actual health when you're young. And so I have some of the documentation here, and what it says specifically is schools should implement physical distancing recommendations to the maximum degree that allows them to offer full in-person learning. And I guess that's what's up for interpretation, isn't it? What do we constitute as full in-person learning? Is it keeping a kid strapped to their desk all day long? Or is it allowing them to move around and change environments when they're in the first, second, third grade, kindergarten? What does full in-person learning mean to our administration? And is there purposeful ambiguity in this language that allows us to make some decisions between now and March 7th to make those little improvements that Mrs. Fricky was talking about prior to getting to that mass optional stage? I actually think we have the opportunity to do some things now for elementary, which seems to continue to be left behind when compared to the other levels. So I'd just like to ask Dr. Fernari, I'll follow up with you individually if you don't mind. I know we've already done it once, but if there's a way to get all 4 principals of the elementary schools together and maybe figure out a way forward versus a way kind of sideways, which is what it's felt like we've been doing. I know there has to be one if we stay solution oriented. So I'd like to ask that. And I actually think the point about class size cohorts, didn't think about it before tonight, but a really, really important one. I think there's a lack of awareness on where to go and what input parents have. I have a kindergartner who's in a class size of 24. There's 2 teachers in kindergarten at FNB. They're bursting at the seams. I know the teachers are having a really tough time with it. And the same can be said for third grade. I think FN Brown in particular, as well as some other schools, are having a lot of trouble with this. How are we planning for adding more staff? Do we have the budget for it? I think the more transparency we get, the better, because that is really, really big for us in the future. Thanks to everyone else for all your comments. Very courageous. We appreciate it. And thanks for your time.
Hi, Gina Signorelli, 26 Valley View Road. I just want to reiterate that I was in complete shock and disappointed for our town when I saw these Facebook pages. I don't think it's funny that I'm here tonight. I'm not putting my kids to sleep. I had to rush from my job at the hospital to come to this meeting. And I just think it's very disrespectful to the parents. This is my 3rd meeting I've attended. I'm still unclear what the purpose of these meetings are overall. I voiced my concerns and questions at the last meeting, which I understand may not be appropriate forum for the group to respond. However, I'm unaware of how the board is addressing each of the questions raised after the meeting. I believe it is important for the board to address every question raised at these meetings and respond to them publicly. There's no feedback as to what will be addressed and a timeline for responses. What is a forum for the board and leadership in our schools to provide us with feedback to our questions and concerns? And what is the most appropriate process to get action? If this is not the meeting, then please tell me where I should be spending my time and energy addressing another forum or another group of leaders. I know this isn't a question and answer forum, but again, please explain the process. So again, when will art be in the art room? What needs to happen, or who's making the decision to take the plexiglass down? When will lunch be back in the cafeteria? I don't understand why we are still here and my child is still not eating in the cafeteria. She's eating at her desk with a plexiglass. It's disgusting. If you don't know when, tell me what the process is and who is making these decisions. Because I email, I get one response, you tell me to contact someone else, you go to the principal, you go back to the board, you do this, you do that. I don't understand it. Please tell me who I need to speak with so I don't have to waste my time anymore. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. My name is Megan Gutnick. I'm at 37 Valley View Road. I have a second grader and a kindergarten. And it was actually funny. They were talking about school. They love it. We love it. And they were talking about my second grader was like, I remember when we used to be in the cafeteria. Remember when I used to go to art? And my kindergarten is like, Chip, we don't have a cafeteria. She doesn't know this because she's never eaten at the cafeteria. She's eaten at her desk with the plexiglass that has no data that shows it's going to prevent any sort of transmission, COVID. It actually shows that it's going to be more harmful in an environment, in a classroom. So that's a question I have. When is the plexiglass coming down? Because it really doesn't serve any purpose. The second one is, thank you for the masks, optional, because 37 Valley View is for that. And I really hope that you listen to this room tonight and to the parents that have emailed you and just discuss, like, it's an option. Parents can choose to put on a mask for their children or not. Secondly, I'd like to address the cafeteria option. I feel like if you said to us, the children can eat in the cafeteria tomorrow, or even outside, because they do eat snack outside, we would have heaters, we would have tents, we would have bowling tables, we would have chairs. I mean, this would be delivered tomorrow if that was an option. We want to come up with solutions. We want to work with you guys. But what we're hearing from other parents is we're not getting the answers of who to go to. I emailed the superintendent, I get an email back. No, talk to your principal. The principal says, talk to the board. So I'm just really confused. I'm solution oriented. I want to work with you if you guys can work with us. I just want my daughter to go to the cafeteria in 2022. That's all I want for this year. And the second one, if masks could be off or optional, March 7th, that would be wonderful too. So the last thing I'll say is I heard on the news tonight, we are not in a pandemic anymore. We're in a pandemic and we got to start living with COVID. And that's where we are. Thank you.
Dr. Fernari, I have one question. So in the elementary schools, is the cafeteria being used for something else during lunchtime?
Yeah, we've actually talked about this before at this table. So in some of the buildings, most of the buildings, the cafeteria is either used for indoor recess, because when it was too cold for kids to go outside, because we are having students go outside for recess when it's below 32 degrees, and it's been frigid recently. And the other thing that's happening is in some buildings, because some of the small group instruction areas are not large enough to accommodate social distancing, some of those small group instruction classes are in those cafeteria spaces. So between the other use of the cafeteria and the fact that in most buildings, in order to socially distance in the cafeteria, you can't really fit more than 1 or 1.5 classes in the cafeteria socially distanced. and the fact that we're using it for indoor recess. That complicates the use of the cafeteria for eating lunch
So it-
currently.
So it's,
Currently.
so it's a hypothetical, correct? But it's possible that if the 6 foot or 2 yard rule is minimized or goes away on the March 7th,
Mm.
it's possible that we would be able to transition
We
into
are
something normal.
looking at alternatives every day. Believe me, I have met many, many times with administration. We brainstorm, we try to, and we have made some changes. As a matter of fact, music is now back in the music room. Library is in the library. Physical education is in the gym. The art room is a challenge because the art rooms are smaller. And right now, we can't fit the class socially distanced as the rules are right now. As those rules change, as the Cali reports start to tell us that we're back in yellow or heaven, even green, which would be lovely, we're certainly going to make change.
Very good.
Any more public comments? If not, we're going to close public comment session. And then as far as, this was discussed at the table as well, going forward, because there are a lot of questions. And the responses come in a lot of various forms. And sometimes it's a direct email back to a parent. If it's something to child specific, then it's referred to the guidance department or caseworker or the appropriate counselor. If it's school building specific, it's referred hopefully first to the classroom teacher. If it can't be addressed there, then it goes to the principal and it kind of gets pushed up the chain. We have been taking notes. Everybody writes down the questions. And what we're doing going forward is going to have a Q&A of FAQ portion. It'll be on the Board of Ed website. So we're working on getting answers to all the questions and it'll be up there for everybody to see. So everybody has all the information at the same time together. And with that, our next meeting is a special meeting on Saturday, February 12th, and that is to conduct interviews. And the next public meeting is February 22nd with confidential at 6 p.m. and public session at 7 p.m. And I need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Day. Second. Second by Mrs. Prisco. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Good night.
Thank you, everyone, for coming out tonight.